let's talk about using text styles and how to create and apply custom text effects. So I have just a basic page here, and I want to go ahead and spice this up just a little bit. Now it's always a good thing to keep your text and your images on two different layers. For example, if I wanted to select this text right here, it would be a little bit difficult if I accidentally clicked on this blue frame right here, which is actually going to act as my picture box. But if needs be, I could just turn my images off or my text off to deal with just those individual frames. So it just shows either my text or my images on two different layers. It just makes things a little bit more manageable. So let's say for starters, what I want to do is I want to put a picture in this blue frame. Okay, so I'm going to turn my text off for just a second. Select my frame. I'm just going to go File and Place. And what I want to do is I want to have the text wrap around this image. It's best to use images with a solid background, like this old boot right here. So I'm just going to double click on that. I'm going to place that in there. We want this to be centered, so I'm just going to select my box using my tools right up here. The first thing I probably want to do is center my content, and I don't want to skew my image at all, so I'm going to fit the content proportionally, and obviously its dimensions are a little bit different from this frame, so I can resize the frame if I want. If I turn my text on, this is kind of what we're looking at. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move this up just a little bit. So I'm going to resize this frame around here. This image is obviously covering up my text. I want to apply an effect so that the text wraps around this particular image. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go down Window, and I'm going to open up my Text Wrap tool, which I have on my custom workspace right here. First of all, if I scroll over the first one, it says no text wrap, which it has right now. Scroll over the other one, it'll say wrap around the bounding box. It's going to wrap around this box. You'll notice down here you have different parameters, and it has this link, meaning whatever you do with one parameter, it'll apply to all of them. So if I wanted a little bit more breathing space around this bounding box, I want to push this text away a little bit, I can just go ahead and click this to add picas one at a time, and notice how it applies all the way around. As I do so, you'll see this little blue line. This shows that 9 pica distance. Well, I don't need to apply extra space over here because I have plenty of space. So I'm going to unlink it and just click on the top, and you can see that the top is adding additional picas. You'll notice this third little icon right here says wrap around the object shape. If I click on that, again, it's just wrapping around the bounding box because it cannot determine the shape of the shape. So what we want to do is we want to create what's called a clipping mask. There's a couple different ways you could do that. You could go into Photoshop and you could create a very precise clipping mask and save it with the image and then bring it back into InDesign. We're not going to go into that in too much detail because that's sort of an advanced technique. Notice how I have my image selected. I'm just going to go Object, Clipping Path, Options. Okay, and it opens up this little dialog box. Type. We want to be able to detect the edges. If you do not have a solid background, this is not going to work quite as well. And I'm going to click on Preview right here, and by default, it does a pretty darn good job. It even gets the shadow. You can adjust the threshold and the tolerance if you would like. It just sort of depends. See here, my threshold is up way too high and it's starting to cut off the boot. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick with, for now, the default settings. Go ahead and click OK. That should be good enough. You will notice it's slightly wrapping around the image. I don't want to move my image, I want to move the whole box. There we go. Okay. Now one thing you want to avoid when you're doing a wraparound text is, one, I like to have a little bit of breathing room. I don't like to feel claustrophobic. And we want to avoid these little tiny half words right here. So we can go in here and notice how now we don't have the link with all 4 sides. We only have one because technically, because this is a shape, it only applies to one side. It doesn't have a top, bottom, left, and right. So I'm just going to start clicking this up, add about a 6 pica space around it. You can see this little blue line that's showing me how far away from the image the text is going to be. And we can go into our preview mode to see what it looks like. You'll notice here I have a text box with a stroke. Let's go ahead and take that stroke off. And we can move it over because here we have some half words. Let's just move that over just a tiny bit. Oh, I cut that off. Like about that. get it adjusted just right. And I might want to push this line out just a little bit more so we don't have any half text. So that's one way to add a wraparound text effect. Now let's say that we have this text up here, this title, and we want to add some effects to that. I have a little bit too much space between the New York and the Examiner. One right here is something called leading. This is the distance between lines. Right now it's set on auto. If I click on, let's say 12 points, you'll notice 12 points is way too low because our text is a 45 point. So if I put 45, should look about right. And I can always adjust this with the individual arrows, or I can type in 65 or whatever I'd like. If I select this box right here, you'll notice up in my Tools panel, I have some individual effects controls right here. Apply effect to an object, a drop shadow, effects, etc. First of all, what I want to do is I want to determine exactly what I'm going to apply the effect to. In this case, it's going to be the text. Here I can choose from a bunch of different types of effects. For example, a drop shadow, and it will open up a dialog box, and I can mess with the drop shadow in here. Say I want the opacity to be about 50%. I don't know why you would want a drop shadow of a different color, but who knows, maybe I want a drop shadow of pink or red, but shadows are always black. I can adjust the angle. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel for now. You can also open up your effects panel. You'll notice right here, if I have this box selected, I can click on my options, and here's the effects, the same things that you saw here. Again, let's do a drop shadow. We'll leave it at the default for now, even though you can change it however you would like. Click OK. You now have this little effects button. If I double click on it at any time, it'll show the effects that are applied to this individual text. I can add an inner glow. I can do a bevel and emboss. You have to be careful because sometimes if you put too many on there, it's going to get a little bit crazy. Click OK, and it applies all these different effects here, and you can get to them at any time in your effects panel by just double clicking on the effects. And if you'd like, you can keep this effects panel on your custom workspace right there. Now let's say I like this effect and I want to save it so that I can use it several different times. Go into your Windows and open up your styles. You have something called an object styles. Just like our paragraph and character styles, I'm going to create a new object style. And I'm going to name this Bevel and Emboss, I guess. Okay, and it tells me everything that I have applied to this text. And here are my effects. That's a lot of effects for a text, but just for illustration purposes it will work. I click OK. Now you'll notice I have this new Bevel and Emboss. Now if I select any other frame with text in it, I can just click on Bevel and Emboss and it will apply these effects. Might look a little crazy, but we'll just show you what it looks like. Now the reason it doesn't look very good is because the Bevel and Emboss amount that's applied to this is applied to this smaller text, and it looks a little bit blurry. If I found a really nice effect that I applied to a title, and in another document I wanted to apply the same object style or effect, I could just select the text and click on that. So that's how you create a custom text effect. That's how you apply the effect to like a headline. And this is how you do a wraparound text effects.